All right, thank you so much. Welcome to another episode of the Love, Hope, Lyme podcast. My name is Fred Diamond. Of course, I'm the author of Love, Hope, Lyme, what family members, partners, and friends who love a chronic Lyme survivor need to know. And Olivia Abrams, the host of over 70 Love, Hope, Lyme podcasts. And we're going to continue into 2026, and we publish an episode every other Monday. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you so much. Give us a thumbs up, leave a comment. We would appreciate that. Olivia, there have been some shows where we've gotten over a dozen to 20 comments, and we love to hear from people who are viewing the podcast and listening. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please give us a 5-star review. We would greatly appreciate that. I do need to say that even though this is a podcast on Lyme disease, I'm not a doctor, so we're not dispensing medical advice here. If you are struggling with Lyme disease and co-infections and other tick-borne diseases, please seek proper medical treatment. All right, I'm very excited today. We have Olivia Abrams, and of course, she's the founder of TiCK MiTT. Is the company called TiCK MiTT?
Yes. Okay.
Very good. So we're good. I'm very excited. We're going to be talking about a couple of things. We're going to be talking about the product and why you brought it to market. And you were also on Shark Tank presenting this product. And we're going to talk a little bit about your experience there. And I also want to talk about the concept, Olivia, of giving back to the Lyme community and being an advocate. And a lot of the guests that I've had on the Love Hope Lyme podcast have gone through Lyme disease. They've reached a point where they have decided to be advocates, or they've created communities. We recently did a show with Lauren Lovejoy from Lyme Warrior, and we talked about the community of tens of thousands of Lyme survivors that she created to provide support, guidance, advice for people going through this disease. And like we talked many times, this isn't a disease like breaking an ankle where, you go to the orthopedic and he'll put you in an x-ray and put you in a boot. And then 2 weeks later, after some rehab, you're okay. Lyme is very complicated. And I know you're also a Lyme survivor. So I'm really interested in your perspective on that. All right. So it's great to have you, Olivia Abrams. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and tell us a little bit about TiCK MiTT, what it is, why you created it, and why it would be of value to our listeners.
Yeah, so my name is Olivia Abrams. I grew up in New York City, but spent a lot of my childhood in upstate New York in the Hudson Valley, which, as we know, is one of the most common areas for ticks and Lyme disease. I pulled probably 10 off my dog yesterday, so extremely common where I am. And when I was about 7 years old, I presented with arthritis in my knee. I had a really difficult time walking. My parents thought that I had tweaked it in ballet class, so they had brought me to a number of orthopedists and to my general practitioner, and they couldn't find anything particularly wrong with me. All of my blood work was coming back fine, and the orthopedist, didn't see anything concerning like a tear. And after about probably 5 or 6 blood tests, which made me severely stressed out about getting needles and shots for years after that, I finally got a rash on my face. And I think that's what cued my dad to say, oh, we've been spending a lot of time in upstate New York. I see a rash on her face. And this is back in the early 2000s. So, at that point, basically everyone thought that the only symptom that would really clarify if you had Lyme was a rash. And so I finally went back to my doctor, and she said, I don't even need to bother testing you for Lyme disease. Just based off this rash, I know we're going to get you on an antibiotic protocol, and you're going to go do physical therapy for 6 months, because my main symptom was really the arthritis. And after that, everyone thought I was kind of going to be okay. I think we caught it relatively early enough where I don't experience any chronic symptoms today as I'm 26 years old. But, Lyme and ticks has always been something that my family has dealt with. We keep doxycycline in our home. If we get bit by a tick, we just start, on a small protocol that our doctor has given us. Um, And I've probably been bit by ticks many times. Everyone in my family has been diagnosed with Lyme at one point or another. And I think that the biggest problem that we saw is that we always had big dogs. So we were concerned about our dogs bringing the ticks into the house. It was, you know, a little bit easier maybe to check ourselves, especially if like we had, my parents were around and they could help me look. But when you have a 100-pound dog who's black, finding something on him is really hard. And so that's kind of what inspired us to come up with TiCK MiTT, which, if you're not familiar, is a chemical-free glove. It's made out of a patented fabric that you can rub over your skin, your clothes, or your pet's fur, or even any of your outdoor gear, like your hiking gear, your hunting gear, any of those items. And any ticks that are crawling stick to it like Velcro. So it's an easy way to find ticks and get them off of you before they're actually able to embed and transfer Lyme disease. So it is a preventative in that you're stopping the ticks in their tracks before they can bite you, but it's something that you use after you've already been outside. I always recommend to people using it before they go into their car or into their home to
Mm.
avoid bringing ticks inside with them. And it's made it a lot easier for me and my family, and obviously all of our customers, to perform effective tick checks and to, help find something the size of a poppy seed without relying entirely on their naked eye, but really just being able to wipe themselves down with the TiCK MiTT.
Wow. So a couple things. One is the first thing to go back to the beginning of your story. There aren't many 7-year-olds who suffer from arthritis. So, it's interesting. A lot of people tell us that they go to the doctor when they begin to have some symptoms. And one of the first common symptoms, of course, is arthritic symptoms because, the bacteria will go into the soft tissue, typically in joints, etc. And there aren't too many 22-year-olds with no history of family arthritis who have that. So I'm glad that I'm happy for you that the rash appeared and your doctor knew right away. So let's talk about TiCK MiTT. So how do people buy it? Do you sell it on Amazon in stores? They buy it. Do you use it once? Can you use it 10 times? Just how do you use it?
Yeah, so TiCK MiTT is available on our website, tickmitt.com. It's also available on Amazon. And if you go to our website, you can find a store near you. So we're in a lot of independent pet stores, hardware stores, lawn and garden stores. We're also available in Dunham Sports, Duluth Trading Co., Orvis, a number of sporting goods stores as well. And TiCK MiTT can last you a couple of years. So it's a reusable product. If you find ticks on the mitt, you can either remove them yourself with your tweezer and flush them down the toilet, or you can, it actually comes with a little dryer bag. So you can pop the TiCK MiTT into the dryer bag in the dryer and the heat will kill the ticks. And then you can just machine wash it because there's no chemicals or essential oils on it that, give out over time. If anything, the fabric gives out over time, and it really just depends on how much you're using it. But it will last you a couple of years, and having one for every family member. So if you are going hunting, your husband's going hunting on the weekends, he can bring one with him. Or if your kids are in after school sports or Boy Scouts, they can always have one on them. So making sure that every family member has one to ensure that they always have the easy ability to do tick checks when they're going outside. And a lot of our customers keep them in their car as well, which is very helpful.
Yeah, that's great. And actually, like we've talked many times, obviously one of the best ways to treat Lyme is to never get Lyme,
Of
and
course.
prevention obviously is the best way. And of course, we talk on the Lyme, Love Hope Lyme podcast. Typically, our listeners are people who have Lyme, chronic Lyme, typically, and they're looking to support. I want to talk a little bit about your advocacy. Again, you went on Shark Tank and you talked about a product. So that's actually well, I want to ask you a question first about being an entrepreneur. Again, you mentioned you're 26 years old. Did
Mhm.
you expect that this was going to be what you're doing in your career right now, is bringing a product that detects ticks? Did you go to college for something else? I'm just kind of curious how this intersected your life and why you're doing this right, and what is the reason why you're doing this right now?
Yeah, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. My dad, my uncle, my grandfather are all entrepreneurs. At one point, my parents worked together on a business. And as an only child sitting at the dinner table, they were talking about franchising and branding and not what I did at school that day. So, I was very much exposed to that at a young age. I was always really inspired by companies like Tom's or Warby Parker or Bon Buzz who had a mission-driven component to their company, and thought that that would be something I would really be interested in doing one day. I also grew up in a home with my father having chronic illness. He did get diagnosed with Lyme at some point, but he really suffered from Clostridium difficile, which is a bacterial infection. And so growing up around someone with chronic illness, I was always very health conscious. We were, always looking at the ingredients of things that we were using in our home, reading about, forever foods and all of those types of things. I wasn't able to come up with an idea to help people with C. diff, but I was able to come up with an idea to help people with Lyme. And so, I feel like that's really propelled all of the work that we've done, both in, creating products and selling them, but also in the advocacy that we're doing. And so I've been able to work with a lot of nonprofits and, do some of the work that you do, where even though I'm not a doctor, I do have access to a lot of resources and I'm constantly reading about the new research that comes out. And so I do get patients asking me for just advice or pointing them in the right direction often. But yeah, I always wanted to do something of this nature.
I'm just kind of curious. So, how long has the company been around for?
So we came up with the idea for TiCK MiTT probably back in like 2016. So we have thought about the idea for a very long time. At the time, my dad had another company and I was in school. When I was in college, we came up with all of our fonts, colors, branding that we use for the product now. So spent some time in my entrepreneurship classes really working on the business. But when I graduated from college, it was right after COVID. So a lot of people weren't really spending time outdoors yet. There was obviously a lot of mistrust in the health industry. And so we just didn't feel like it was the right time to launch our company. So we officially launched in March of 2023. So we've been on the market about 2.5 years now and have grown so much in that time. And, started off just selling a few a month on our own
Mm.
website. And we've sold, probably 115,000 of them this year so far. So, and we're only 2.5 years in. So I'd say that's pretty good.
I think that's amazing. So I'm just kind of curious, and you can answer this however you want. So where do you see this going? Or do you see it branching into more geographies? Is that where you're looking to go, or sell more of the TiCK MiTT? Are you looking to bring other Lyme-related products to market? Again, you don't need to tell us all your corporate secrets, but just kind of curious on where do you think this is going?
Yeah, so we do sell products in the US and Canada. We've done a little bit of sales in Europe and Asia as well, and I think continuing to expand into those markets. I really see us being a 360 tick solutions company, all chemical free, helping both people and animals. And so we do have a number of new products coming out next year. This year we did launch TiCK MiTT in a smaller size for kids. And then next year, one of our new products that will be coming out is going to be to help people better remove those embedded ticks. I think that,
Mm,
what happens is a lot of people are either scared to do it because they don't feel they necessarily have the right tools, and then they end up going to a doctor or an urgent care to get it removed. Um,
mm,
or what ends up happening is a lot of people will buy, tick removal tools online, and then I find that they lose them very easily, is what I hear. So
mm,
whenever I talk to people and I tell them I'm in the tick business, they'll be like, "Oh, I have one of those tick keys, but I don't know where it is. I haven't seen it in a while." And I'm like,
mm.
"So that's a problem. Is you're gonna one day maybe find a tick on you, and you're not gonna know where that thing you bought 5 years ago went." So
Yeah.
that's also a concern. So we do have a product hopefully coming out in January to help with some of those issues.
Very good. Before we talk a little bit deeper about advocacy, again, I mentioned you were on Shark Tank, and Shark Tank is one of my default shows. Either Shark Tank or Classic Law and Order. So I've seen every episode, and uh, I know you got a couple of offers which you declined. So good for you. I'm just kind of curious. You mentioned cause. a cause product, and there have been a couple great successes on Shark Tank, with a couple. I think Bombas, I believe, was a Shark Tank
Yep, they were on
product, and
Shark Tank.
yeah, and Damon took. I think Damon was the investor, but I'm just kind of curious. A lot of the show, a lot of the sharks are based in New York. Lori and some of the others. I'm just kind of curious. Again, you mentioned Hudson Valley, obviously the Hamptons, Long Island is a big, epicenter for Lyme disease. You got two offers. So besides it being a good financial offer, was there awareness from the sharks of Lyme disease? And, we call it the quiet epidemic, from the documentary. And you and I, being in various advocacy roles, know the extent of Lyme disease across the globe in Australia, Europe, et cetera. Just kind of curious, was Lyme disease something they were aware of and they were attracted to a product that you brought to them?
Yeah, I think that they all had different levels of awareness. I think generally, I would say they had basic awareness. They all knew what Lyme disease was. They all knew about ticks. They all knew that obviously in the New York area, this was a really bad
Mm,
problem. But when you started telling them some of the statistics of, how many people get Lyme, how many tick-borne diseases are out there, that this is not just a Northeast issue, that's when they really started to get more curious. So, they had that general knowledge that, ticks are an issue, just how big is the issue actually? Um, if you watch the episode, which you can find it on Hulu, Barbara tells a story of how her son was bit by a tick when he was 3 years old, and they had to rush him to the hospital. And so she was very familiar. She called herself the tick chick at one point, and
mm,
so she had a very strong understanding of why this was so problematic. I think that Lori as had a strong understanding as well, and then we found Mark, he is very well educated in healthcare, as
yes.
we know, but he, I would maybe say is a bit of a germaphobe.
Mm,
He heard the word ticks and he wanted to run the other way. He said, I don't spend a lot of time in the outdoors. And because of that, like, it just wasn't the
oh,
right fit for him. He didn't want to have to think about ticks on a regular basis,
okay.
as we all wish we could. But from an investor standpoint, I think that that made sense. I think that Damon felt that he had seen a lot of people with Lyme disease, but he had only really experienced it in the Hamptons, as you
Mm,
said. So wasn't as aware of all of the other areas within
mm.
the country and in the world where this is a huge problem. Um, so I think that they all had like a pretty general understanding, but once you start rattling off some statistics to them, definitely could see that this might have been a bigger problem than they initially thought it was.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Did the Shark Tank come after you because maybe someone on staff had an experience with Lyme disease, or did you did you initiate trying to get on the show? I'm just kind of curious if you're allowed to discuss that.
Definitely initiated trying to get on the show. I mean, there are a lot of ways that people apply, like on the website, or they go to casting calls. So, we did that.
Okay. And last question, again, you famously got two offers and and you declined. But what happens when you decline? You say, "Thank you, I'm not going to accept the offer, but I appreciate it." And then they say, "Oh, we're disappointed." And then then you turn around and you walk through the doors. Is there anything, do they come back after you, or it's kind of like, okay, I made a decision and why ever you made the decision is great. I'm just kind of curious. Is that it? Like, I declined, thank you, and it's over. You're done. You walk out the door. Whoever's with you, you go say hi, go get lunch, or,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
mean, your shot with the sharks is when you're in the tank.
okay.
That's when you get to talk to the sharks. That's when you get to pitch your business, and that's when your opportunity is. And we felt very strongly that we did not want to give up 30% of our business. So, we graciously said, thank you very much for your offers, but we don't feel that this is the right fit for us, and turned around and walked out the door.
Very good. So one thing that you've done is, you've raised your profile as an advocate, like we talked about, and you've done a bunch of things, and you're public, not just obviously with the product, but the whole cause, and it's the reason why we have the Love Hope Lyme podcast and why I wrote my book, Love Hope Lyme, what family members, partners, and friends who have a chronic Lyme survivor need to know. By the way, I might not have mentioned this in the upfront, but the ebook of Love Hope Lyme has always been available for free. And I've given out, Olivia, close to 5,000 copies. If you're a chronic Lyme survivor, feel free to reach out to me. But talk about why you feel it's important for people in the Lyme world to speak out about it. As I use the example, nobody's talking about broken ankles, right?
Yeah.
But there's so many people. I've added 5,000 social media friends since I published my book in the summer of 2022. I don't have Lyme disease. I had someone in my life who had Lyme and I wanted to learn more about it. I get 20, 30 people a day who reach out to me asking for, like you mentioned in the beginning, a resource. Have I found this report? Can I connect them to somebody? Should I take this particular treatment? And not being someone with Lyme, I usually just try to quickly refer them to either another Facebook group or someone, an organization that can help them out. Why is this important?
Yeah, there's a number of things. So since I started on the journey of TiCK MiTT, I've gotten involved in a number of the nonprofits. I serve on the board of Project Lyme. I've worked with the Center for Lyme Action. I've tried to do some state lobbying here in New York. Have been involved in a number of events within the Lyme community. And I think what I found, which is really interesting, is there has been a huge growth in research that we've seen over the last few years. But I find that a lot of that research is focused around treatment and diagnostic, which, of course, for everyone who's listening that may be a chronic Lyme patient, this continues to need to be done, right? We need to continue to figure out new ways to treat current patients. We need to figure out how, we may be passing along bacteria from the ticks, from mother to baby. We need to have better diagnostics. All of this needs to continue. But what I've also found is there is a huge lack of money, research, or emphasis on awareness and prevention. So that, in my mind, the best way to get our community to be better is to not have more people join it. We don't want more cases of Lyme disease. We don't want more cases of alpha-gal. We don't want more cases of Babesia or BART. And so, in order to do that, the general public needs to be made aware of how significant this problem is. And there was actually a study that came out last week, I believe, with Pfizer and Johns Hopkins, and they interviewed 70,000 people, almost all of which who lived in high risk tick areas. And what they found is only about 40% of those people performed any type of prevention for ticks. So only 40% of those people wore bug spray, tucked their pants into their socks, did a tick check before they came home. So, that's 60% of people who aren't doing anything, even though they know that they live in a tick area. And that number actually becomes closer to 15% if those people only go in their backyard. So if you're only stepping into your backyard, the likelihood that you're going to do anything to check yourself for ticks goes down significantly. And I would say that is probably our biggest problem is that people aren't doing tick checks. They're not protecting themselves, even though they know it's a problem. And so I think that that is kind of my goal is changing not just the awareness, but actually the steps to take action. I want our kids, my kids, the next generation to be taught that doing tick checks is just as important as putting on sunscreen, washing our hands, and tying our shoes, because this issue is continuing to get worse. And if people don't create a habit around this, the likelihood of them protecting themselves is very low. And I don't think that we're doing enough in that space.
Very good. So thank you so much, Olivia Abrams, for being on the show. Congratulations again on the success of TiCK MiTT and getting the message out there. And uh, I'm just kind of curious. So again, we're talking about advocacy. I'm also involved with Center for Lyme Action, and for people who don't know, their mission is to communicate to government to get more funding for treatment, for testing, for care, mental health related care as well. Tremendous organization. We've had Megan and Bonnie Crater on the show at numerous times. And also, I love what you're doing with Project Lyme. And, Ali Moresco has been on the show before as well. And she's an amazing human being. Just kind of curious before I ask you for your final thought, where do you want to see us in a year from now? Again, for people listening, we're doing today's interview. Actually, it's Halloween, October 31st of 2025. If you're listening in the future, a year from now, next Halloween, 2026, what developments do you want to see as it relates to Lyme disease and other tick-borne diseases?
I would love to see Lyme being included in more conversations. So whether that's a conversation around chronic illness, mental health, general safety. I just find that Lyme disease is left out of the conversation a lot. So that's something that I'm really pushing for. I would also love to see more media attention and PSA campaigns, so that people have, something where they're becoming more aware. I would obviously like to see hospitalizations go down. I think we had a spike in hospitalizations this past summer. So those are all things that I think we could realistically do within the next year. Obviously, we'll continue to make some strides in research, but I don't know
Yeah.
in particular what research is going to be done or completed with by that time.
Yeah. So congratulations again on your success at the ripe old age of 26. Uh, you've given us so many great ideas. I love what you're doing. Congratulations on, bringing awareness and helping to spread the message and for providing a product that is going to hopefully reduce, the number of people who get infected with ticks. And I encourage people to find TiCK MiTT and get it wherever they're sold, as Olivia had mentioned before. Why don't you give us one final thought, something you'd want to leave us with, um, some message of hope?
Yeah, I something that I find is that people who have been through a really difficult time, need something to continue to live for. And so if you are either currently going through treatment or you're coming out of treatment or, you're moving back into going back to work or whatever that may be, finding some sort of passion project, I think is extremely critical. So, sitting down and thinking about what really makes me happy. Like for me, it's dogs. So like any excuse that I have to like interact with dogs, I'm there. It makes me incredibly happy. It's something that I really try to emphasize in my business so that I can continue to have those moments. For other people, it may be music, it may be art, it may be movies. Finding something where you're ensuring that you're giving back to yourself and your soul is really, really important. And I also encourage caregivers to do that too, because being a caregiver can be hard. I've been there. So,
Yeah,
finding a passion and making time for it.
very good. As I tell my daughter every morning, I've been telling her this since she was in kindergarten: take your passion and make it happen. All right, once again, thank you so much, Olivia Abrams, for being on today's Love, Hope, Lyme podcast. My name is Fred Diamond.